Vacation plans, long commute, weekend at the cabin. Wherever you end up this summer, the Connector Idaho Daily News helps keep you connected to Idaho, even while you're away. Get the top local stories every weekday morning in just a few minutes. That's the Connector Idaho Daily News. Listen on your podcast app.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Cadet. This is Idaho Matters. Today, the FDA is expected to make a decision that could shape the next chapter of mRNA technology. The agency is set to rule on Moderna's mRNA flu vaccine, which would be the first of its kind approved here in the U.S. Now, supporters say it could lead to better flu vaccines and even help pave the way for future treatments for cancer and other diseases. But the decision is also happening as the technology faces growing political scrutiny. It is Wednesday, which means Dr. David Pate is joining us today. He is the former CEO of St. Luke's Health System and the co-author of the book Preparing for the Next Global Outbreak. Hi, Dr. Pate.
Hi, Gemma.
Folks, remember, if you have a public health question, you can send us an email, idahomatters@boisestate.edu. So, Dr. Pate, I know we've talked about this mRNA flu vaccine one other time, but for folks who might not be up to date on this, can you tell us again what makes this mRNA technology actually different than like the normal flu vaccine? And the fact also that I believe what the FDA advisory panel did recommend the approval, we're just waiting for this approval to happen or not happen.
Right. So this vaccine technology has a couple of advantages. One is that compared to the traditional way of making flu vaccines, which is roughly about a 6-month process from the time the authorities determine which strains they want covered, then to make and manufacture the vaccine and get it distributed, about 6 months, because that technology is heavily dependent upon the use of chicken eggs to actually develop the vaccine. The mRNA technology doesn't require the use of eggs. So first of all, for all those with egg allergy, that would be one less problem. But the other thing is, because it doesn't, it can be, instead of the typical 6-month process, we can actually develop it and distribute it within 2 to 3 months. And the advantage there, if your listeners recall this last flu season, we made a decision, as we always do, based on what viruses were circulating in the southern hemisphere, because they are having their winter and going through their flu season ahead of us while we're still in our spring and summer. And what happened is that towards the end of their season in the south, the virus had mutated significantly. But by that time, we had no time to configure a new vaccine. mRNA technology would actually give us the opportunity that if we had decided, hey, this is a substantial change, we could have actually prepared new vaccine. It's also an important technology to deal with a future pandemic where if it's something that is transmitting widely, quickly, and is deadly, you need to get a vaccine as soon as you can. This is the technology that offers us the soonest opportunity to get something out that can protect people.
And we should know, I mean, we've heard a lot about the mRNA because of the COVID vaccines and then all of the political upheaval around that. One thing I think we should talk about, though, is that researchers say that this technology, Dr. Pate, I mean, it's not just about the COVID vaccine. It's not just about a flu vaccine, right? And being able to switch quickly if that flu strain changes. It could eventually be used against cancers, Lyme disease, other diseases. I mean, so how significant is this decision we're waiting to hear about beyond just preventing the flu?
Well, it's very significant. First of all, the scientific advisors, those that look at this vaccine from a safety standpoint, effectiveness standpoint, medical standpoint, they unanimously endorsed it. Um,
Mm.
if the FDA leadership was to um, not approve this over their objections, this would send a terrible message to the industry of both established and startup companies that are looking at new ways to harness this technology. That, just as you mentioned, already we have an instance where this technology has, in early studies, offered a new option for people with metastatic melanoma, which is a terrible
Mm.
disease. So we know that there are additional uses in fighting cancer that await us. But if there is a decision not to approve it, that will be political because the scientific and medical evaluators all unanimously endorsed it. And that will just mean that those companies during this administration cannot count on approval for use of those technologies. And so they just won't invest in it. They won't do the research on it, and they won't spend the tens of millions of dollars it costs to bring a vaccine to the market.
Oh, one more question about the mRNA flu vaccine. So, for folks who are listening and they're wondering if this gets approved, whether they should choose an mRNA flu vaccine over a traditional flu shot, what questions maybe should they be asking their primary care doctor? And what should they know, about today's decision as we all wait for that to come down?
Yeah. So the first thing is the approval, if granted, is expected just to be for people 50 years old and older. So
Mm.
if you're under 50, you're still going to go with the traditional flu vaccines that we offer. And it is important to get those. And the reason for the age restriction is just that is the group that was studied. And so they have the evidence to support the efficacy in that group. My guess is that with time, they'll do more studies in more age groups, and we'll probably find, like we did with the COVID vaccines, that actually it benefits everybody of all ages. And I expect it will be expanded over time. But this flu season, if approved, likely would only be available for those over 50. And then, as far as making a decision, whether you want to get this vaccine or the traditional vaccine, the trade-offs are if you go with the mRNA vaccine, you are more likely to have the side effects, the sore arm,
Hmm.
the achy feeling, than with the traditional vaccine. That's usually short-lived, less than a day. It's not terribly severe. That usually would interfere with your activities, but it's annoying. But the benefit is it does appear to provide more protection from getting flu and being sick. And there is, when we look at the immunologic response, it appears that this technology causes you to make higher levels of antibodies, antibodies that might cross react with more strains of flu, meaning that if we are a little off, you might have better protection. And it appears that, at least in some, it lasts a lot longer. You and I have talked last flu season about the importance of not getting your flu shot too early because
Hmm.
that protection does deteriorate with time. And so sometimes people can get the shot at the beginning of the season, but then get infected at the end. This protection looks like it is a lot more durable for the flu season.
And one more question when you said, wait to get that flu shot, Dr. Pate, I have already seen signs out at pharmacies for the flu shot. We're in early August. I'm assuming we should be
Yes.
waiting.
Don't do it.
Okay.
I mean, unless you
Okay.
are traveling internationally and going to some place where they have their active flu season, like the Southern Hemisphere, don't get your flu shot yet. And just like last year, you and I will follow this. And when we start to see the uptick in flu cases, which is much more likely to be somewhere around Thanksgiving, give or take a few weeks, then we'll tell people, okay, time to go get it.
All right. I want to move on now to other news because Idaho has reported its first heat related deaths of the year. We've had some triple digit temperatures. And Dr. Pate, how concerned are you that we have now seen 3 heat related deaths this early in the hottest part of the summer? I mean, what does that tell you about what's going on?
Yeah, it is a risk. It's a risk every year as temperatures get higher. And I mean, the first thing, of course, is the absolute preventable ones are please don't leave children and pets in cars. And even for brief periods of time, the temperature can go up in a car sitting out in the sun very quickly. It's just horrific, and it's a terrible tragedy when this happens. So that's the first thing. Just don't do that. Second, if you need to be out, for example, your job requires you to be out on roofs, or you're doing construction, whatever. Be mindful of the heat. Be mindful of your body. You've got to stay hydrated. You've got to be sensitive to when you're not feeling right, because your body will give you warning signs that you're getting overheated. You will feel bad. You may get a headache. You may feel nauseated. You may feel weak or dizzy. Listen to your body, and if that's happening, get out of the heat into the shade or into the air conditioning, and get cooled off, get hydrated, and make sure you stay that way. Older people and very young people are particularly susceptible to the heat, so you have to be extra careful, and be careful of your young children outdoors to make sure they're not getting overheated. And the other thing is, if you're older and you have chronic medical conditions, there are many medications that can increase your risk of having a serious heat related illness. So review those with your pharmacist or your doctor. A lot of them are common medications used for hyperactivity or attention deficit disorder, psychiatric conditions, blood pressure, fluid pills for heart failure, and other things. So check and make sure, be extra sensitive if you're on medication, that you have a risk, and just be very careful of how much heat exposure you're getting.
So, Dr. Pate, we also have a question came in from John from Twin Falls. And he says he's talking about smoky air. So his question is this: the underlying assumption is that indoor air is cleaner than outdoor air when elevated particulate levels rise. But how many air handling systems actually have a filtration system included with the air handling equipment? Don't most HVAC designers assume outdoor air is fresher and better than indoor air? So what happens when that assumption doesn't hold true? Does staying indoors, is that the best solution to pollution, is what John is asking.
Yeah, very good questions from John here. Let me start. Now, I want to say that I am not an expert on HVAC systems. I have learned a lot, but I'm still not an expert. But so let's just start with a couple of things. He points out about an assumption that indoor air is cleaner than outdoor air. Well, that is almost always true. And because I think John is thinking that there are many HVAC, that's your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning is what it stands for. That those systems, that there's many that don't have filters. To my knowledge, that's not true. If it's a forced air system that is going through your heating and your air conditioning, to my knowledge, they all have filters. Now, the real question is, what is the efficiency of that filter? How effective is it? So, because there is a filter, the indoor air is going to be better than the outdoor, but depending on the filter, that could be significant or it might be negligible. So, what you want to do is talk to, if you have one of those systems, hopefully you're getting it serviced twice a year, talk to them. And what you want to find out is they are going to have filters. If they are activated carbon filters, that's not going to be very protective. If it's a washable filter, that's not going to be very protective. If it's a fiberglass filter, that's probably not very protective. And those are kind of on the cheaper end. Whereas if you have an electrostatic filter, or if you have, and they'll show you them, they'll pull out the filters and show you. And usually, if there's not electrostatic, which is a metal one, then it's a pleated filter, and it should have a MERV rating. That's M as in Mary, ERV, MERV. And they go by numbers, but sometimes also colors. So at the low end, hopefully you don't have anything less than an 8. But that's really just going to get dust and lint and things like that big out of the air. That's a silver color rating. In between is an 11. That will be a gold color rating, and that will additionally get pet dander, and it will help filter out some of the smoke. Ideally, if you're able and the cost is not prohibitive, you want to get a 13, MERV 13. That would be the platinum color, because in addition to getting dust, lint, pet dander, smoke, the dangerous particulate matter that is in the smoke right now, it also will filter out bacteria and viruses. Those almost every HVAC system that I am aware of is going to have a filter. The question is how efficient it is. And even if you don't have a very, or the highest level, or 13, and you want to do something more at bad times of the year like it is now, you can also add, as I do, indoor air filtration systems, air cleaners, air purifiers to assist.
All right, appreciate that. So, Dr. Pate, I want to move on to the latest with this cyclosporosis outbreak, because we now know that 2 people have died from this, I believe, in Michigan. I know we've talked about this quite a bit before, but what, again, should people be knowing about this? And who is at, I guess the biggest question is who is at really risk for severe illness from this infection? Because we should note that 2 people who died did both have significant underlying health conditions.
Right. And that is going to be the typical case. This parasite, cyclospora, it typically just makes you miserable. It doesn't kill you. Some people will not get very sick, but many will. And in fact, although praise God, we've only had 2 deaths, that we're probably seeing those deaths because this is just such a huge outbreak. We have more than 18,000 cases in 45 states. And we should keep in mind that although most people do recover from this and death is not common, we've had 423 people hospitalized. So this is not trivial. Usually the hospitalization is because you get dehydrated, because the biggest symptom of this infection, excuse me, is watery diarrhea that can be profuse. So the problem is people getting dehydrated, especially if they have underlying kidney problems, underlying heart problems, then they're not going to tolerate this as well. So those people have to be very careful. But when people do die, and unfortunately, if it's a large enough outbreak like this one, that can happen, they do tend to be older individuals that have a lot of chronic illness and they just can't tolerate this degree of diarrhea and the fluid challenge, because oftentimes not only does it cause the diarrhea and water, but it causes you to kind of lose your appetite, and you may not have the same thirst that would drive most people to compensate for the liquid. So you really have to kind of be careful to keep up your hydration and force the fluids. But it's a tragedy, but fortunately, this is not one of those kind of outbreaks that's going to cause widespread death.
Mhm. The next thing I want to talk about, Dr. Pate, is that Dr. Anthony Fauci is once again at the center of a political and a legal battle. He invoked the Fifth Amendment during a Senate hearing last week, and this was on about the government's COVID-19 response. There's a Senate committee that is now expected to vote on whether to hold him in contempt of Congress. So before we even get into the politics of all this, you are a lawyer as well. So can you explain what the Fifth Amendment actually protects and why someone would he's already received a presidential pardon from former President Biden? Why might he still choose to invoke the Fifth Amendment in a situation like this?
Yeah, this is a frustrating experience for everyone. The Fifth Amendment is a protection that we all have against self-incrimination. It is a right that when we are being accused or being investigated for a criminal offense, that we have a right to be represented by an attorney, and he was represented by several. We have the right to not answer questions if we so choose, and so we can't be compelled to give testimony that might be used against us, because that any testimony we give can be used against us in a trial. So those are protections. This was unfortunately set up to be a circus, because the chairman has it out for Dr. Fauci. The chairman had repeatedly threatened to try to find ways to send him to jail, and had indicated that he was going to be carefully reviewing anything Dr. Fauci said at this hearing to see if he could make legal charges. So no one in their right mind would walk into a situation like that where they're not seeking the truth, they're seeking to put you in jail, and then just give them the potential ammunition to do so. You rightly pointed out that he has a pardon, but that pardon was limited to the events of the time when he was serving in office, which he no longer is. And therefore, anything that happens at this point, he would not be protected by the pardon. So his lawyers gave him good advice. Unfortunately, it just makes the whole thing a show. The issue is trying to get around this issue of, did the virus start naturally in animals and transmit to humans, or was this a leak from a lab? That's a very good question. Unfortunately, at this point, I do not believe that that question can be answered either way. I think one answer is much more likely than the other, but if it was a legitimate exercise, you don't threaten people before you have them come to the hearing if you want to really get to understand the facts. The second thing is, we are spending so much time on this political spin of this whole thing that instead we're not talking about, okay, well, let's plan for the future for both possibilities. How do we prevent lab leaks, and how do we prevent zoonotic transmissions or diseases going from animals to humans. There are options for both of those. And unfortunately, we are spending time on drama and stuff that will circulate on social media instead of trying to get to those answers and make responsible plans going forward.
Well, as always, Dr. Pate, we so appreciate your perspective and your expertise. We've been talking with Dr. David Pate. He is the former CEO of St. Luke's Health System, also the co-author of the book, Preparing for the Next Global Outbreak. And remember, if you have any type of public health question for Dr. Pate, all you need to do is send us an email, idahomatters@boisestate.edu, and then Dr. Pate will answer those for you. And thanks so much for listening to Idaho Matters from Boise State Public Radio. Do you have thoughts about today's episode? Make sure you email us at idahomatters@boisestate.edu or reach out on our socials. Just by listening, you're helping to support public radio right here in Idaho. And I want to say a big thank you for that.
The fatal shooting of a teenager at a protest in Seattle has gone unsolved for 6 years.
This is open in your face. How are there no answers?
Our investigation has uncovered new evidence and witnesses who say they've never talked to police.
Did police ever call you?
Not once.
Listen to We Keep Us Safe, a new true crime series on the Embedded podcast from NPR.